You're now listening to the sound of sanity. This sound will continue for the duration of the program. Hey everybody, welcome to Sound of Sanity. My name is Nathan. I am your humble and obedient host. That's Ben right there.
Hello.
Associate producer, Rock on Tour.
Yeah.
Monster Fighter.
Heavy on the rock on.
Yeah.
Rock on tour.
Heavy on the rock on.
Sometimes I go on tour.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
That's right.
You're not light on the tour either.
No, not.
Yep. Well, Ben, as part of your rock on tour, why don't you introduce the other guy?
The other guy. Yeah. Man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah.
Jake Menzel, pastor.
Master of Sanity. He brings the sand.
Hi, Jake.
To sanity.
How you doing today?
Feeling a little weirded out by your creepy voices.
Well, folks,
It's pretty creepy.
we just watched the Cruella trailer.
I think we're all feeling a little creepy.
Yeah, we're feeling a little creepy because it's good to be bad, though. Her name's Cruella. I'm not going to waste another thought on that. It broke our brains, though. So that explains this intro. Speaking of things that break our brains, though, we're doing it again, folks. Hashtag, one of our favorite segments here on Sound of Sanity. Haven't been able to do it for a while. And he's kind of had a new shtick for a while because he wrote a book called The Wisdom Pyramid that he's been trying to sell for the last half a year, I think, through a good chunk of COVID at least. Maybe even before COVID. I don't know. I don't track this man's career closely. But we like to check in with our friend, Gospel Coalition writer, I believe ruling elder of some church somewhere, used to be a pastor. Doesn't really matter for our purposes. His name is Brett McCracken. He's a fellow that writes for the Gospel Coalition. We have a segment, a reoccurring thing that we do on the show. It's called hashtag Release the McCracken.
Maybe we could call it hashtag McCracken the wall.
Hashtag Rock on Tour. For that.
What can I say?
So our usual beef with McCracken articles is that he is and was the Gospel Coalition's pop culture guy. He'll talk about he'll review movies. He'll release his favorite albums of the year.
Yeah, he's their pop culture guy, and pop culture has been our shtick. And so he just sort of is one of the few people speaking to the masses in the same space we are, and usually doing it in a pretty gross, terrible way that needs to be dealt with. Yeah,
he will, for example, just to prove that Jake's not speaking out of turn or being overly aggressive or anything, he will talk about the Christ-like analogies in a Quentin Tarantino film, which on its face is wicked, just bad. And
the redemptive themes of Tarantino films is not something that Christians should really be trying to explore.
Yeah. I mean, his basic insight is that life reflects the gospel and the story of redemption. And so therefore I can find echoes of the story of the gospel in Quentin Tarantino films.
Quentin Tarantino at his most nihilistic and disgusting.
Right. Ergo, Quentin Tarantino has some redeeming value. This is a bad
take.
Bad take. I'd much rather
actively destructive.
I'd much rather just have someone say, I like violence and revenge and witty pop culture dissections like Quentin Tarantino does.
Yeah, say that. Be honest about it instead of trying to baptize it in a way that makes it Christian.
That's also a bad take, by the way. But I think a much better take than
a more honest one.
Yeah, at least
let's be real. The only reason you go to such great lengths to jump through so many hoops to provide a moral justification for enjoying Quentin Tarantino flicks is you just like that kind of violence and nihilism.
Right.
And so be honest with yourself about it and be honest with other people about it. There's no gospel Christ honoring reason to love a Tarantino bloodbath.
So that's our history with Brett McCracken. We've picked on the guy a lot. But today we are actually just going to go after one line in an article you can find on the Gospel Coalition, published February 16th, 2021. Don't fill every open moment with content. And so Brett McCracken kind of has two things that he does. He'll do his movie reviews and things like that, which we actively stand against. They're very bad. But then he'll also have these little takes about we should appreciate the finer things and we should make space in our lives for stuff and things. Someone more charitable than me could make it sound better. These articles, my point is, they're kind of just fine.
They're kind of good.
They're kind of good.
For the most part. They're just, hey, I'm the pop culture guy and I feel an obligation, since you guys pay attention to everything I say about pop culture, to say, hey, pop culture isn't everything, and there's more to life than pop culture. And if you don't have space in your life to appreciate nature and be devoted to scripture and loving your family and that sort of thing, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, even there, he's weird because he wants to almost deify nature. He loves Terrence Malick. That's his favorite filmmaker. And Terrence Malick really finds the divine in these images of...
Well, Terrence Malick's filmmaking style is divine, if I recall, practically.
Yes, he uses a Christ-like gaze in his cinema.
Yeah.
You can find that episode.
Yeah, you can find that episode.
Christ-like
We dealt with
gaze.
that.
The Christ-like gaze of Terrence Malick. He also did one about how the joyful longing of carpool karaoke.
Yeah.
Probably his masterpiece, or his disaster piece, whatever what do you say?
Apotheosis?
The apotheosis of Brett McCracken's terrible take on pop culture was the joyful longing of carpool karaoke. Anyway, you can go listen to all those episodes. But this article falls in the kind of hashtag just fine category. Basically, he says we should make space in our lives to think. When I'm waiting in line to order my drink at a coffee shop, I'm quoting now, my automatic instinct is to grab for my phone, not to do anything necessary, of course, just to scroll aimlessly for the minute or two before it's my turn to order, unquote. And then he'll go on and say what you'd expect, which is we should provide some quiet places
In our lives. For reflection and meditation and actual thoughtful engaging with the world around us instead of just sort of passively being consumed with content at every turn.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll quote, be still and know that I am God, and maybe a couple other scriptural references, and basically just say we should have some moments of quiet in our life. And okay, fine. I mean, I think we could even go after that because it's part of a larger gospel coalition, anemicness, anemiosity.
Animosity.
Animosity.
Yeah.
Animosity towards doing anything that would surprise or convict or actually be all that helpful for anyone. But in and of itself, in the proper context, which it's not in, but if it was, this article is just fine. Our goal is not to tear the article apart. Our goal is, though, to go after exactly one sentence in the article. And I will now read that sentence. Quote, here's one small thing we can all do to become a bit more wise then. Carve out some space, any space, to be silent, still, and unmediated, rather than letting every inch of your attention be colonized by content. Unquote. Jake dropped that in our Slack yesterday. Me and Ben were like, what's the problem? It seems pretty...
What's wrong, colonizer?
Yeah, what's...
I think that's what we said.
Yeah, that's what we said.
Yeah.
What's wrong is that word colonize.
To use that word is to be signaling things.
That is the contention that we are going to make in this episode. So the definition of the word is verb of a country or its citizens send a group of settlers to a place and establish political control over it. Or second definition, come to settle among and establish political control over the indigenous people of an area. If we were just sticking with that denotation, then I guess whatever. But we're talking about the connotation of the word.
And the connotation of the word is the larger cultural backdrop of critical race theory and intersectionality and the use of that word to signal the oppression of minorities and Black people. And so to use that word in that way is to reinforce woke ideology. It's to virtue signal to a woke ideology, and it doesn't really matter if McCracken's doing it on purpose or not. It doesn't matter if he's naive about it. If he's naive about it, he soaked it in, and he's being careless and unintentional in his language and unthinking.
That's the best thing you could put on it.
Which is what he's actually challenging you to do in the article, right? He's challenging you to actually think about life and things and not just be a passive partaker of culture and of content. Well, here he's at best passively, naively spitting out cultural wokeness, or he's being very intentional and doing a weird, gross kind of virtue signaling. That carries with it all kinds of assumptions, and they're not assumptions that we should be normalizing in how we speak and how we think as Christians.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I just want to make it clear up top. For our purposes, I don't think it really matters what Brett McCracken's intention is. When you're in a position of leadership, when you have a forum, when you have a megaphone, the Gospel Coalition, and people trust you, you have a responsibility to get things like this right, and you're culpable if you don't. So if he's just being stupid and passive, that's just as bad as if he's being actively malicious.
Right.
It really, I really don't think it matters that much.
Well, one of our larger critiques of the Gospel Coalition overall is that it's always making friends with the world and the way it talks about things and approaches things and giving over the battle.
Yeah.
So part and parcel of what they're doing.
Yeah. And it, again, part of the difficulty always in dealing with the Gospel Coalition is they do a lot of good things and are a large help to a lot of people. But that very fact makes them dangerous when they do stuff like this.
Yeah, if they were just lame and woke and bad and we all knew that, then we wouldn't be bothering doing these episodes because nobody in our circles would actually care or be tempted to listen. But in an article where Brett McCracken's actually saying something pretty helpful.
And then he laces a little bit of poison in.
Yeah, that's bad.
That's bad.
If it's just poison with a big rat skull on the front, then nobody wants to drink it. But nobody's going to think twice about drinking this, and they're going to get some poison. So yeah, bad job, Brett McCracken.
So bad.
Boo to you.
You should release the McCracken from his contract, the Gospel Coalition. I guess that's what our hashtag release the McCracken means. Cancel Brett McCracken.
No, we don't want to cancel Brett McCracken.
No, we want to improve. Nothing would make me happier than if Brett McCracken ever responded to one of these. Because we've done several, and we don't usually tag him or anything on social media, but I think we have a couple times. And I don't know, I would be aware if people made a regular shtick out of
coming at me,
even if I thought it wasn't worth responding to. Probably the best response, strategically speaking, is no response. Why would Brett McCracken draw attention to us? But that would be fun if Brett McCracken decided to bring the release his own McCracken against us. Anyway, folks, thanks for listening. And oh my stars, the DAA. What is this sound that rings in my ears?
Well, it's a sound that means one of us is going to turn traitor, maybe. Or you don't have to put it that way. We're just going to argue for the opposite of what we just said.
The opposite of what we just said. So
That's
the DAA
right.
stands for the Devil's Advocate Alarm. You just heard it, folks. That means somebody needs to argue for the opposite of what we just said, like Ben just said.
Yeah. And I think it's probably me, because I feel like my instinct is speaking half sincerely and half in my role as Devil's Advocate listener.
But half sincerely, at
least before we had an off-mic conversation about this. Colonized is valid metaphor. It just means something's aggressively, parasitically taking over. So every inch of your attention is being aggressively, parasitically taken over by content, and everyone understands that that's what Brett McCracken means. And that's
exactly why that's wrong. Because to
Jake,
flatten everything into this black and white, all bad, all good.
Yeah, but Jake, before I even let you go, I have to say that everyone knows the colonizers did bad things.
True.
Everyone knows that, and speaking as Americans,
are we allowed to acknowledge that they did lots of good things?
Well, let's talk about I'm gonna support Ben here a little bit. Let's talk about the Trail of Tears. Let's read the diaries kept by Columbus's men, one of whom gleefully describes raping a native woman and how he got her to comply with him. It's right there. You don't have to find a little snippet that Twitter took out of context. It's real. I've read it.
Yep, agree.
Let's read the true story of Custer and what some of those expansionist jerks did to the native peoples as we swept across the West, the women and children that were murdered, let's talk about the malaria-ridden blankets. At the end of the day, I feel bad. I feel bad about being associated with colonizers, and that means that his metaphor feels legitimate. And let me deflect ahead of time something that you might say, Jake, which is, were there heroes on both sides? Was there bad people on both sides? Sure. Was it a little bit more complicated? Sure. But the fact is, everybody has negative associations with colonization for a reason. The way that Britain treated India, the way that Britain treated Hong Kong, the way that these different things played out were not great. You don't have to be a liberal progressive to admit that.
True.
And to ask the question, what gave them the right to come and take over Native American land, for instance?
And so when Brett McCracken plays on this trope, okay, I don't like the movie Pocahontas any more than any other conservative, but there's a reason it's a trope.
True.
Jake looks ready to respond.
No, I mean, the point is, I'm not allowed to respond, right? I'm not allowed to acknowledge the bad and talk about the good, because every time I try to talk about the good, you're going to rub the bad in my face, which is what just happened, right? And so my choices that you're forcing me into is all good or all bad. I have to either argue that malaria blankets are good, that rape is good, that pillaging is good for the greater good. I can't just say that's bad, but also, you know what? These places, these cultures were also bad, and there were good things that happened, and there were positive things that we can't have a conversation that deals with grays, that deals with in-betweens, that deals with any realities more complicated than white colonizer equals bad.
And so you're saying that Brett McCracken, just by using the metaphor, is tapping into that false...
Yeah.
To step out of devil's advocate role, you're saying Brett McCracken is tapping into that false dichotomy and accepting it, and teaching you to accept it too.
Right. And that's bad. It's wrong-headed and unhelpful at best, and evil at worst, because if you want to acknowledge the atrocities committed by Columbus and his men, by Custer, by any number of other people, you have to then turn around and acknowledge the atrocities of Native American culture, of Indian culture, of African culture, and you have to accept that we live in a world of sinners.
Yeah.
And there are always people taking advantage of every possible situation for their own gain and to the harm of other people. To say that is just to say that people are people, okay? But the reality is, if you can acknowledge individual evils on both sides, you should be able to acknowledge net goods.
Net goods.
And net evils, right? And the fact is, if you look at the colonizing world, if you broke the world down into percentage of population that is Protestant, Roman Catholic, and Muslim or pagan, you have basically divided the world into three categories. First world, second world, third world. The first world is Protestant. The second world is Roman Catholic. And the third world is Arab, Muslim, and pagan. And the fact is, wherever Protestantism has been, it has been associated with missionary movements that have also been associated with colonialization and imperialism. There have been real wicked things that have happened and that have been perpetrated in the name of Christ. And yet at the same time, real overall positive net goods have happened as well across the board. And it's just a much more complicated conversation than saying missionary movements, colonialization, and imperialism bad. Because you have to reckon with the reality of the world in which these people went into. And nobody wants to do that. No, everybody wants to have the idea of the noble savage. Everybody wants to have the idea of these pristine cultures. But African slavery was horrendous. African slavery in Africa was horrendous.
Right.
Native American culture was horrendous. You can tell the stories of Columbus's men raping people. Let's talk about what happened in those Native American tribes on their own. Let's talk about what happened in those Native American tribes when they got their hands on a white woman.
Let's talk about the Indian caste system before the British Raj and all.
Widow burning.
Like all of that.
William Carey.
Yeah.
It's barbaric.
It's just absolute barbarism. It's horrendous. And what you get is, yes, opportunistic evil people taking advantage of people in these cultures, but you also have, in the wake of those things and in the wake of that chaos, some order, some rule of law implemented that results in and has resulted in net goods for everybody. Right. And to pretend like it's all evil is to be regressive in your thinking.
Well, and pretty much across the board, the people that made it there first, I'm generalizing here, but it was the missionaries.
It was the missionaries.
And they brought souls to Christ. I mean, if you count that as... If you actually take the real big picture and you look at people's souls and you think about heaven and you think about hell and you believe that those are actual places where people go for eternity, then the first thing, the biggest part of the white man's burden was, let's save these people's souls from hell. And were there people that took advantage of that? Was the rubber trade in the Congo horrible. Was Joseph Conrad onto something in Heart of Darkness? Yes.
Absolutely. And for all of those reasons, those cultures have not been allowed to advance and have been held down in different places too, because people found ways to maintain that level of oppression.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact remains that still quality of life has improved for everybody across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And quality of life improves more dramatically the closer you are to Christ.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And that is something we need to be able to actually say and talk about without being accused or playing into or being told that we're just white supremacists, that we're racist, that we're colonizers, right? To use that language, colonizer, it reminds me of when the Gospel Coalition was writing its articles against reparative therapy, right? And siding with the bans in Cincinnati against reparative therapy. Well, reparative therapy is not the gospel.
Right.
But that's not what they're attacking. They're attacking anybody who would say, hey, you have same-sex temptations, you can change, and you need help. To use this kind of language that allows you to lump anybody that would go into a culture and try to improve it as a colonizer who's an invasive species is evil, and it conditions you to hate missionaries and a missionary impulse, or even a culturally improving impulse.
Well, it also
in and of itself.
It also, I was being honest when I said earlier, kind of as the devil, that I had this feeling. That word's okay, and I feel bad, and that's because even though we've talked about some of this stuff on mic before, and I know this stuff, I can lose the framework in kind of the storm of rhetoric, if you like. Spend enough time on Twitter. Just the way everyone talks, what everyone assumes is not what biblical Christianity teaches.
I think your brain might be smarter than Dances with Wolves. Your brain might be smarter than Pocahontas, the Disney movie. Your brain might be smarter than the Avatar narrative.
Right.
But your heart isn't. I mean, I don't think we can discount how much we've all been brainwashed. And we might kind of know, okay, Pocahontas is silly. You can do the research for yourself and you can kind of know it. But let's not pretend like we're all better than the air that we breathe, that we're all just able to stand outside of all the conditioning and all the brainwashing and just be free of it. Ben's describing a way in which he just brings those associations and his
I ought to know better.
Yeah, and you do. But the automatic filter that your brain produces, the chemicals, the synapses that fire aren't the ones that say, oh yeah, colonialism, that whole concept is crap. They're the ones that say, oh, guilt, bad, oh no, white men, oh no.
Yeah. Well, our job is to bring the kingdom of God to the world.
Yeah.
Right? Our job is to exercise Christ's dominion over everything. And everything in our world is geared towards making us think that's bad. Right? Oh no, you're exercising dominion over creation? No, the wilderness is great. No, in Scripture, wilderness is bad. Right? Wilderness is to be made into gardens. That's man's imperative given from Genesis chapter 1. Our job is to tame the wilderness, to take chaos and move it to order everywhere, across the board. And that's true on the level of nature, and it's true on the level of society. Right? And so our job is to bring order from chaos culturally across the board, and to see cultures redeemed by God's word and transformed by God's word. And that means the idols must burn. That means the rule of law must be implemented. It means all kinds of things that look like and will look like to people just cultural conformity to Western civilization. And it doesn't have to look exactly like Western civilization, but the principles that undergird Western civilization exist because of a culture transformed by people who have been transformed by the gospel of the kingdom. And that has to persist across the board in every place the gospel touches. That's the mission. That's the goal. That's the aim. It's a world transformed, a people transformed, a new humanity. And we can argue about what degree we can expect or hope for the success of that. We can have arguments about eschatology and postmillennialism and amillennialism, and it just doesn't matter.
And we can argue about history and whether this was good there and that was bad.
But we can't stand over history. We're automatically better than all of our ancestors who were part of Imperial Britain or something.
Yeah.
Which we do, which it's like an automatic. That
Well,
again,
I mean,
is
we're
part of the
tearing
spirit of the
down
age.
statues of George Washington because he owned slaves. George Washington wanted to end slavery. It was more complicated. He thought about things like what would happen if we just let all these uneducated people suddenly be citizens. He was really thinking about it.
I mean, in line with everything Jake's pointing out about the spread of the gospel and what that brings with it, I've been listening to Thomas Sowell lately, and Thomas Sowell is hopefully not really news to anyone listening, but I haven't listened to much of him, read much of him. But Thomas Sowell is like, no, actually, the real question is, what made people start thinking slavery was bad? Everyone assumed it was fine until Western civilization.
Every culture had slaves.
Right. And it took a while, but Christianity worked through society in such a way as to end slavery in the Western world.
Yeah, and it's the only place where it's ended.
That's right.
The fact is, slavery persists all over the world, and everywhere paganism tries to intrude, you find slavery reintroduced in crafty, underhanded ways, right? And it's why people are so intent on prison reform. If you start thinking too much about the prison systems of the United States of America, we've gone from justice, from the punishment fits the crime, to, oh, you got caught with a bag of weed 3 times and now you have to do life in prison and you're a slave of the state. And then the state uses you to make and produce all kinds of goods for the state, right? This stuff is complicated if you are willing to think about it in a biblical way and have your eyes open and not just assume that now right, yesterday bad, wrong.
Me good, everyone else in history of humanity bad.
Yeah.
That must be a nice thing to think.
Yeah, how arrogant. How arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
Things are just always more complicated. And if you teach people to buy into these nice, clean, black and white narratives and ways of thinking and looking at the world, and you teach people to stop thinking, to not be critical thinkers who care about actually being discerning and applying God's word to the world they live in and to themselves. And so at the end of the day, you have McCracken in this article ostensibly promoting that we become critical thinkers who aren't just carried around by the content we consume. Here it is, just blatantly in his article. Right? Okay, there are always going to be ways where every one of us, because this is just the air we breathe, we make these kinds of mistakes. But this is not one that I wanted to let get by.
No. And I'm sure you could find some misuses of language in our podcasts. We've
100%.
We've only recorded 40 billion hours of content where there are many words, there's sin. But it's of a piece with the kind of thing that McCracken does all the time, actually.
Right, and with the kind of compromises the Gospel Coalition actively promotes.
Yeah, what he's actually doing is saying, hey, left, hey, progressives, I get it, I'm cool. You can pass me by when you're taking us all to the camps.
Which is never how it works. People always want to think that, and that's never how it works. You have to, so I mean, this mentality is just, if I throw people to the right of me under the bus, then they'll make space for me. But eventually what happens is there's nobody between you and them. Right? So you either have to, you're next in line, or you have to keep moving left.
Right.
And that's what you see happen with people like Russ Moore.
Well, the French Revolution style schadenfreude of it all is that eventually it catches up with all the leftists.
Exactly.
Like, they all go down. You can be Joe Rawling, fairly nice progressive woman, and she just doesn't want to go out on the transgender limb. She'll give him everything else, and she's canceled.
Yeah,
I call her Joe. She's my friend.
Aww.
Ever since they tried to cancel her. I want to add a couple things here. Number one, just another example of where my thinking aligned, where I just found myself brainwashed, and it was I really had to take the red pill and realize, oh, I've been taking that blue pill for a long time. Somebody within the last few years told me, hey, cities are good in the Bible, and it had never occurred to me, because I've watched Blade Runner, and I've watched noir movies, and I've watched Batman, and it's like, of course cities are bad. And Cain was going to build a city in the Bible, and he wasn't supposed to, so I guess in some fuzzy
Babel.
Yep. And Babel is bad. But we're working towards the New Jerusalem. There's a pretty big good city metaphor type thing right there.
The garden city of God.
Yeah.
Right?
Like cities.
Yeah.
And so I just had this framework that I had no idea. I mean, it's scary to think, what are the other ones? What are the ones that God hasn't revealed to me yet? Like, it's just this place where the pop cultural, even meta narrative was just what I had soaked in and what went through my head.
Well, look, man as invasive species is a phrase that came out of my mouth earlier. And the reason that happened is because my daughter, who goes to a Christian school, came home and had to do a paper had to do an assignment on invasive species where she had to think of it an example of an invasive species. Mm-hmm. So her answer was people. And the idea that because of the way that she has been taught what invasive species are and the way that I started asking her questions about that, right? Mm-hmm. The things she started popping off, and she had to watch this climate change video and stuff. It's like, yo, my Christian school that's trying to teach my kids about, I don't know, science and their place in the world should be teaching some semblance of man's dominion, man being made what does it mean for man to be made in the image of God? I don't know. God made Adam king, and Adam is to the world what God is to Adam. I don't know. Maybe say that to some kids.
I mean, to tie that back to this, if you're going to use the language of colonize, you're going to teach people don't take dominion. If you do, you're an oppressor.
Exactly.
Just as a rule.
Yeah, well, you're oppressing nature, you're oppressing people.
And
right?
McCracken's never going to say that. In fact, he would probably talk about taking dominion in positive terms. But he's caving in ways that undercut anything he might, because I'm sure that he believes what you just said, basically.
But he doesn't understand the implications of what he's actually saying.
Right. Yeah, he just hasn't. Well, the best spin we can put on it, the most charitable spin is he just hasn't thought about it. And that's not that great of a spin because that just makes him culpable
for his naivete.
Yeah. So I keep thinking of G.K. Chesterton, a little book by G.K. Chesterton, not one of his big money titles, but it's called The Blatchford Controversies. And Chesterton's answering a dude named Blatchford that wrote about why I think atheism was good when they were doing newspaper articles back and forth. So somebody collected all of, maybe Chesterton, I think Chesterton was published in his lifetime. They collected all of Chesterton's articles fighting this Blatchford guy. And it's a really great little book of apologetics. And one of the points that Blatchford made was Christianity brought the Inquisition. And Chesterton's argument back at him has always stuck with me, which is, what on earth did you expect? You say that this is why something's bad. But if you actually look at human beings, when something good hits, A, it's way more invasive, and B, it's way more disruptive, and C, it causes way more weird problems than something bad. It's only for a really great ideal that people will torture each other to death, that people will en masse rise up. I mean, liberty, I think he talks about the French Revolution. Liberty, fraternity, equality. Like, those were why France ran red with blood. And so he says, you look at humanity, you look at the depravity of man, you look at the way that we go. Obviously, one of the best arguments you could make for Jesus Christ being the Son of God is the Inquisition. Because only something that good could create a perversion.
So bad.
Mm-hmm. We're not excusing the rape of the natives by Columbus's men.
You can actually look back and you can condemn all of the evils that were done. Mm-hmm. Name them, list them out, condemn them for what they were, make provision to guard against such things ever happening again, mm-hmm. while acknowledging that the net good of Western civilization spreading to North America.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you can see that the net
Christendom, of Christianity, mm-hmm. spreading to North America. We all sit here living in air conditioning and in heated homes and with crazy microphones and the internet and technology, all this stuff that we take for granted, that we benefit from every day, is because Columbus got on a ship. And you can acknowledge the good of all of that, of the end result of that, while still condemning much of the evil that was perpetrated in the process. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can do both. Mm-hmm. It would not have been better for Columbus and everybody else to have stayed put in Europe. It would not have been better. It would not be better for India if Great Britain had not been an imperial superpower. It would not be better. It would not be. Mm-hmm. Period.
Right.
It would not be better for the world for Great Britain to have not been an imperial colonizing country, empire. Period. End of story. And there would be much more and more horrific forms of slavery to this day across the world.
Like there were.
There were at the time.
Before they invasively said, nope, sorry guys, can't do that.
Before they invasively co-opted it, regulated it, and then destroyed it.
And they destroyed it at great cost to themselves.
At great personal cost.
At great personal cost. Which was nothing if not invasive. I think
and abusive in many respects.
But this whole notion of invasive equals bad, there is no good that is not invasive. When you mold a child's character away from its natural character as a parent, you are being invasive. You are going in and changing things so that they are not the things that they would naturally be.
When you discipline's about.
Yeah, when you prune a plant, you are invading that plant and you are making it into a plant
that's more beautiful and more fruitful and that thrives.
And when you prune a culture, when you change a culture, you are saying that thing must die and that thing must stay, and it is a messy work, and sinners sin as they do this messy work, but it is necessary. The power
all kinds of corrupt people find opportunities in the midst of the chaos that's being created to simply hurt people and take advantage of people for their own personal gain. Always going to happen, and you don't even make peace with the fact that that's happening. We're not arguing that either.
No, but you do understand that
you don't take Stalin's approach of, or
you gotta make a. Yeah, Stalin said in order to make an omelet, you got to crack a few eggs.
No, you refuse that, but you still acknowledge the fact that people are people.
Well, and what I would say is, we invented airplanes. They take us all over the place. They're really handy. People die in airplanes every year. You don't accept that.
Lots of people died in testing airplanes to get to the place where air travel is relatively safe, just like lots of people died in car crashes, test driving cars.
But the fact is, because we have decided to wield the power of the natural world as God made it to make people fly, now people die and fall through the air, and it's sad. And it's not that we accept that that's anything else but terrible, but we do understand in some kind of just common sense way that it is the natural result of the good that comes with air travel in a fallen world where bad things happen. And so I think you do, without excusing sin, without not fighting against sin, you do have to understand when the Brits go into a culture, of course there are going to be bad people that do bad things. They should be stood against, but let's not be surprised by it. Let's not think, what's this? Bad people are doing bad things?
Oh no, the baby must be thrown out with the bathwater.
Yeah, what's this? The bathwater's dirty? No, yeah, get rid of the bathwater. Fine, great.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do. That's what being in charge and making decisions is getting rid of the next bathwater so you can bring in the next baby.
Yep.
Which is what a number of slave owners among the founding fathers were trying to do. Time.
Yeah, and now we
the bathwater
from on high, from our perch in the beautiful, wonderful 21st century, we would judge them for not just burning the whole thing to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, how many children do we murder a year as a society without thinking about it and pretending it's okay?
An insane amount.
How many children do we send to be mutilated because we want to promote a sexual ideology that's contrary to nature and God's design? I mean, what hypocrisy. It's mind-numbing hypocrisy. It's just so insane. It's so insane.
So your reading assignment is The Blatchford Controversies by Chesterton. I would also recommend for anyone who wants to start to understand a little bit about the barbarism of the indigenous peoples, the Indians, read a thing by a North American pioneer woman who actually had the experience of being captured by the Sioux. Her name was Fanny Kelly. She wrote something called Narrative of My Captivity Among the Sioux Indians in 1871. And you can find it, I'm sure, Project Gutenberg. And I'm sure you can just read this, just Google it, and you can find it for free.
And go ahead and read about the atrocities committed by Cortez and Columbus and anybody else you want.
Yeah, but understand the barbarism. Just be done with the Pocahontas narrative of there was these noble, happy people, and we came in and messed everything else. It's just simply pure propaganda. It's not true.
It's all lies.
It's all lies. Say what you will about us, but look at the truth of who these savage people were. And I should not be risking cancellation to say the word savage in relation to these people because they were barbaric. It needed to stop. The human sacrifice, the sexual degradation, the use and abuse and discarding of women and of children sexually.
It was horrific.
They're horrific. So you read this account and you'll read about her sister being scalped. You'll read about all this stuff, and it's just one place to start. Anything else to say about Brett McCracken's utterly repugnant and morally indefensible sentence in the middle of this just fine article?
Well, the other thing I want to say is also go back and read the history of Europe before the gospel came. The name savage actually was first applied to Europe.
To white
Europe.
White savages.
And justified. Barbarian is a name that applied to the white savages of Europe before the gospel came and transformed Europe.
There's so many places where we as Christians take the rap for things that we explicitly cleaned up. It is so demoralizing, and it really just makes you feel like crap when you realize everyone's like, oh, the English Commonwealth under the Christians had the rule of thumb. You could beat your wife. No, we got rid of wife beating. Oh, the Puritans would dunk women in water for being disrespectful to their husbands. No, the Puritans were some of the first people to say a husband can't just physically chastise his wife. They were the first people to just put that on the books.
Yeah.
Let's just make this one law, boys.
It's just so absurd. Every place where you see regulations that are meant to restrict savagery and abuse are places that are now trotted out today as being permissible, giving permission. Right? We talked about this in Bible study the other night. When you think of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, you have that stupid Gandhi saying or whatever, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and the whole world goes blind. No, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth was meant to...
This guy knocked out your tooth. You can't just take his head.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly right. Exactly right. You can't just take his head. It's meant to put a restriction to prevent excess retribution and vengeance.
Right.
Right. It's supposed to make sure that the punishment fits the crime on both sides. Right? And so you look at things like that and it's like, oh, because God demands that the punishment fit the crime, we want to pin all of the abuses on God and on Christians, on Christianity.
It's almost one-to-one. It's just this repeatable formula anywhere in the Bible or in all of human history where Christianity came in and regulated something is a place where we now take the blame for it in the cultural conversation. I mean, it's almost just like, it's that simple. If you see that we're blamed for something, it's almost certain that you can go back, read the primary sources, and realize, oh, we're the ones that came in and regulated that and fixed it. So slavery is our fault. Well,
came in, regulated it, improved,
but we're the oppressors.
Yeah,
and then eventually abolished it.
Patriarchal abuses of women are our fault. Oh, actually, we're the first society that had any kind of respect for
protections
women.
For women
at all.
And we're so much the bad guys as Western civilization, Christianity influenced that whiteness itself is a sin. It's like a corrupt state of being.
So yeah, it matters when Brett McCracken plays this narrative. It really, really matters. He's really, really done real harm for anyone who listened to that article. He's reinforced all of this simply through choosing this word. You can't argue otherwise. I mean, maybe if he used the word in the opposite way, if he said, we need to colonize our minds with helpful thoughts.
As a positive metaphor?
Yeah, if he used it as a positive...
He would never get away with that.
Yeah, if he defied the connotation somehow.
Yeah, I think that's the proof that he's culpable, is that he couldn't get away with just using the word in a positive way. He would be jumped on.
Right.
The word has a lot of weight in our culture.
Well, I guess the question is that word then dead? Can we simply just not use that word? Because there's no way that we can use it and escape our cultural baggage. So I guess Jake, Nathan, and Ben, we just can't really use the word. The word has been rendered useless. It's been piled up with all this garbage.
Yeah, I mean, unless we want to just sort of say, actually, we need to colonize China, and we want to hold that line, then no, we can't. Yeah,
unless we want to be aggressive in retaking the word.
Exactly, that's what I mean.
But probably there's better places to use our time and capital than
trying to retake the word colonize?
Maybe. I don't know, listener. What do you think? You want to try and colonize the word colonize with some good baggage? Land your boat on the word colonize and plant a flag.
Next step, cancellation.
Well, I don't think we can end the episode better than that. Brett McCracken, if you're listening to this episode, I would sincerely love to hear a rebuttal.
Oh, man, yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. Slide into my DMs, man. Or just do a public thing. That'd be even more fun. Okay. Thanks for listening, everybody. Sound of Sanity, produced by me, executive produced by Jake and me, associated with with the tyranny and oppression and an invasive species that is Benjamin Sulzer.
All right.
Our associate. I don't know why I can't say that word. Our associate produced. Thanks for being here, Ben.
You're welcome, Nathan. Glad to be here.
I like your shirt.
Oh, thank you.
It's a nice sort of maroon, brown, blue
it's
kind
a
of
Christmas gift shirt.
color. Yeah, well.
And I like it too.
Someone loves you.
My wife.
And proved it this Christmas.
She proved it.
All right, folks. Let's go to patreon.com/Sound of Sanity. New episodes of Sanity Bites every week. This week, we talked about the death of Rush Limbaugh. Had a good conversation about that. So you want to hear us talk about the death of Rush Limbaugh and things associated with the terrible response that people had to that? Head over there, patreon.com/Sound of Sanity. For the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can really help our show out and help us continue to produce great content like this.
And you'll feel less hyper.
You won't have as much coffee running through your veins. If you're a pregnant woman, you're only allowed 1 cup a day or something like that. You owe us that money.
Wow.
All pregnant women, please send your money to Sound of Sanity. Is that invasive of me? Is that oppressive? Folks, until next time.
Stay sane.